Oh, hello there. Do you like magic? Do you like conversations between magical people about magic and about how those magical people got magical and the habits that they do every day to maintain their magic? Are you neurospicy? Maybe on the spectrum. Are you anti colonialism? Then have I got a show for you. Coming up, episode 13, the season finale of the second season of Empower Your Magical Self. And welcome to the 13th episode, the season finale of season 2 of Empower Your Magical Self. I'm your host, Leah Wellborn, the Mystic Autistic. I'm glad you're here today. Today, we're going to look back at all 12 episodes that has made the season. I've picked out some great clips. I won't say the best clips because I believe every bit of each episode was fantastic. So I picked out a choice bit from each episode so you can have a little sampler of what's gone on before. And I'm sure if this is the first time that you're engaging with this material, you will want to go back and listen to at least one episode, probably all of the episodes, because my guests are so intriguing and so magical. This has been a big year. Season 2 happened during the calendar year of 2024, which has been a big one. It's actually been the best year of my life, even though it's been a very difficult year. I broke my leg this year, so I was completely incapacitated for 3 months. I was unable to walk, unable to drive, unable to put any weight on my right leg, so I was basically in bed and walking around with a walker from July 7th to September 18th when I could start to be a little weight bearing again. Started this season just before I broke my leg, and several of the interviews that take place, I can see that I was in pain and maybe should have delayed taping. But we do what we do, life happens, and we work with it. The first interview is with a woman who you might know as Wolf Woman from social media, from Instagram and TikTok, etc. She is such an inspiration. And like me, she is neurospicy. She is a photographer and funny as hell and very entertaining and has a huge following on social media. In this clip, we talk about soul contracts and about whether we like it or not, we agreed to come here for a reason. Check it out.
We choose to come here, and it's interesting like how many arguments that happen with that statement, because there are so many people that are very angry with being here, right? But we have our soul contracts and we write them up with our spirit team, and we know why we're coming here, and we know we have to break karmic cycles. We know that we have medicine to bring to this earth, to this learning planet or prison planet, depending on how you look at things. And then we get here and we're like, why did I come in this room? You know what I mean? Like, and our whole lives are spent hopefully getting back to that space of understanding, of recognizing what our soul purpose is. But it's hard. It's hard, but it's work that we're all supposed to be doing. So we're fighting the good fight, man.
We are. And you are such a light, and you're so inspiring. And I just found you really are. And one thing that I love about my podcast is I get a chance to talk to people like yourself, who I just find on social media, who I just, I'm so excited when your posts come up because they make me feel good.
You know, it's just become a really beautiful community that I just really never experienced. And I get comments consistently on my page, like, have you always been this way? And, how are you, I want to be like so happy and go lucky like you. Must be nice to be like that in your life. And it's just like, man, I went through the bowels of hell to get here, and I'm continually working through a lot of that energy and that darkness, and it's a constant growth. It's a constant, up and down of energy and flow, because that's what we are, like we are energy and we are flow. And so if we don't tend to that magic, then our magic dwindles away. And
one thing we talk about a lot on this show is perspective shift. I used to be in a place where my perspective was compromised by my past trauma, by stories I told myself, by my ego's efforts to keep me safe. There were all sorts of things that kept me from having a good, healthy perspective. And I'm not blaming myself, just like I don't think you should blame yourself if you're in that position now. But I did manage to switch my perspective, and that has been the biggest, most edifying thing that I have ever accomplished in my life. So we talk about that a lot in this show, and it's not just from my point of view. It's a common theme among the people with whom I talk on this show, who are all magical people and who have all overcome a lot to build magical lives. My next guest was on the second episode of Empower Your Magical Self. Her name is Shariah Wise. She is a high vibe musical artist. High vibe is my genre. I love high vibe music. It fits in well with my soul lit, which is what I call the regimen that I live my life by. I don't live by a diet. My effort is to only consume things that light my soul on fire. Thus, it's a soul lit. And high vibe music is a big part of that because music can set the tone for your life in so many ways. So I found that if I listen almost exclusively to high vibe music, it helps me keep myself in a higher vibe. One of my favorite high vibe artists is Shariah Wise, and she joins me in this next clip, and we talk about how very important a perspective shift can be in changing your life. Enjoy. Really, it's a perspective change.
Yeah, it's a perspective change. And, it's a practice because I actually had someone recently ask, like, how do you keep the feeling? Like, okay, like I'm playing the role, but how do you keep the feeling? And, like, the literal way that you keep the feeling of your embodiment of the version of yourself you're creating is when you have and when you do have the moment where you step back into your default state of being. You have a conscious remembrance of, oh wait, I'm playing a role, and then you use your conscious mind to like train your subconscious mind. You then be like, okay, wait, let me step back into the role. But every time you step back into that role, that embodiment, you're training your nervous system that it's safe for you to be this. And from my own experience, the more you do it, you'll have a moment where you'll look around and it's like, oh wow, I'm not acting anymore, but
It's true.
I
Yeah.
will say it does, for me at least, it did kind of feel like I was acting, but then I just had fun with it. I'm like, oh, wait, this is just a game. I am acting, don't take it too seriously, have
But
fun with
in a way, isn't that what just life is, right? I mean, we're here
it.
playing some kind of a role, and we can choose to play the role that we're programmed to play, that culture says, okay, be a good little girl
Right,
and, mind your manners and be sexy, but not too sexy,
right.
and get married and have kids, but not too many kids, and work,
Yeah,
but not so much that you're not with you. You can try to do all that shit,
right.
and best of luck if you're going to. But then you can also choose your own path, which I beat myself up for so long because I didn't fit into that mold and never really desired and so felt like something was wrong with me. And
Mm,
it's just now, after having been diagnosed with autism, that I'm beginning to really embrace all of the little quirks and weirdnesses. And I regret that it took that diagnosis to give myself permission to fully be in love with
mm,
myself. So I want to offer, as I do pretty much on every show, anyone who's listening, that permission to fall in love with themselves right
mm.
at this moment, whatever that means. And I know that Shariah does too.
Absolutely.
My next clip is with author and filmmaker Bob Peck. He wrote a book called Original Sin is a Lie. It's a great book, and it examines mysticism throughout different religions. The title is a little bit of a misnomer because it seems as if the whole thing is going to be about the Bible and about original sin, but that's really just a tiny little part of it. He and I talk in this next clip about how each of us is divine, how God, or as I like to call it, magic, is a spark that's in each of us, and how the mystics look at that side of different spiritual paths as opposed to the rules and regulations of a religion. Really great discussion. Check it out.
Because the book is called that Original Sin is a Lie, it's provocative, and some people think it's all about original sin. And yeah, no, it's really about the premise is that you're inherently divine. You're not originally sinful, you're the opposite. And so I explore as you know, the kind of the Bible scholarship sides of things, Buddhism, Hinduism, some indigenous wisdom, psychedelia, and kind of non-duality, the dream, and so on. So it's a spiritual buffet line, if you will.
And it's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite books that I've read in a while.
The core teaching of the mystics. And maybe I'll just quickly define mystic, or what
That's a
that
good idea.
means, which is, essentially in every religious tradition, and outside of religious traditions, of course, but in every religious spiritual path, there is a kind of exoteric and esoteric. So exoteric just means institution, kind of community, power structure.
The rules.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
It's fine for some people. But the other side is the esoteric. And essentially all that means is inner path. The word mystic comes from the Greek word mu, from mute, meaning silent. And so there are men and women throughout history who, essentially, in kind of another term here, is broke the veil.
Right.
They cut through kind of what is called in the Eastern philosophies as the veil of delusion, the veil of ignorance, the veil of separation, which is a controlling, conditioned net that affects all of us and all of society, and I think is responsible for a lot of suffering and depression and so on. And it's possible. I think that's something I would say is these men and women basically cut through that, through their own internal path, by uniting with the divine that is in them and in every being. Immanent and transcendent is a mystic term also. So the idea is the divine is both here and beyond, immanent and transcendent. And so the mystics connect to that energy, and they radiate this level of love and understanding. And it's inspiring to me because I'm also stuck in the mud.
My next guest is honestly one of my heroes. She is Amanda Yates Garcia. She is known as the Oracle of LA. She has a book called Initiated, The Memoir of a Witch. It's a brilliant book. I highly recommend it. And she's the person who has inspired me for probably a decade now. I really, really look up to Amanda a lot. So I'm very honored that she was on my show. Now, you may or may not be able to tell. You can watch this clip and tell me. But I was in pain. I was in some serious pain when I was talking to her. And her brother, who is her assistant, was very gracious in offering me a time to reschedule if I was in too much pain. So I don't want to make it seem at all like it was about them being demanding. I was very excited to talk to Amanda, and I just wanted to do it. I felt like I could do it. I probably should have rescheduled, but it's an excellent episode. And here we are. Amanda and I are talking about the protests that happened at UCLA. She is in a graduate program at UCLA currently. And how after October 7th of 2023, the student protests that built, how those protests opened her eyes and opened my eyes as well to a lot of the truth and propaganda that goes on that she and I thought that we were wise to. So it's an interesting conversation. She and I are both very anti-colonialist. You will definitely hear that in this recording. And I hope that you enjoy it, that maybe it makes you think of things a little bit differently. She is great. I encourage you to check out her podcast called Between the Worlds and to listen to what Amanda has to say. She's a very wise woman. Okay.
We're trying to get the university to divest. And there were snipers, and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of police. It was brutal. It was violent. It was horrific. And then seeing the way that was then portrayed in the media, I was there on campus. And then seeing the way that it was portrayed in the media, which was like opposite land,
right? Like they were saying that the protesters were being violent, when in fact the protesters were constantly defending themselves from the violence of the counter protesters and the police. And they were saying all this horrible stuff like, oh, the protesters, like there was like excrement smeared everywhere, and they were like, you know, doing drugs, and like, and I was like, what planet are you on? That did not happen. And to see the way that was portrayed, that was like a major like wake up moment for me, because then I realized like, oh, there's nothing that this system has ever spoken of that has been true. Like this system lies constantly, and it lies in order to portray the people who are standing up for what is right and true and good as aggressors, as violators. So there's no way that we can trust anything that we see in the media, and that was a moment of complete disillusionment for me. And I'd already been disillusioned, but that was like a moment where I was like, oh no, this cannot be reformed, because because everybody is in on it in the positions of power, because the cult, not because they're bad people, but because the system that we're in gets them, or gets people, the egregore gets people to behave in a certain way. So that egregore needs to be dispelled. However, what has shifted for me is I feel like a lot of us have now moved to this next step where we're like, okay, yeah, finally I see this is not workable. This is not sustainable. We cannot keep going with this, which is something that people of color, Indigenous people, queer people, you know, trans people have seen for a really long time, right? Since the beginning. They've been like, no, this is wrong. But finally, you know, many of the people who have occupied positions of relative privilege within the system are also now seeing like, no, this is not.
Up next is another high vibe music artist, Monita. This young woman, I smile when I think about her. She talked with me from China. She's at Kung Fu camp, which I think is just the cutest and most adorable and in a way life affirming thing. Her lease ran out in London, and so rather than get another apartment immediately, she thought, well, why not just go to China to Kung Fu camp, as one does, right? And it's funny, you'll see in this clip, I ask her if she grew up in London, and she's, no, I'm German, and she's surprised because I can't tell her accent. Her English is so good. She sounds British to me, but she pointed out that British people immediately pick up on the fact that she's German, and I don't know. It was just a funny moment to me. She's absolutely adorable. If you haven't checked out her music, I highly recommend her. She's a great deal of fun. Follow her on social media. Follow her adventures in China and around the world. She is just a doll, a living doll, I say. So here is Monita. Enjoy.
I love them.
Yeah. Yeah, but it wasn't like, you know, like childhood. I grew up only with my mom. She had alcohol issues. She passed away when I was 15. I was like a year in like a orphanage, blah, 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 blah. So all of that, but like, I don't really identify with that. Like, it's just something that happened, you know?
It's like another lifetime almost. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like how people say, sorry?
I was just going to ask, you grew up in London. Is that correct? Or?
Oh, no, Germany.
In Germany. See,
yeah,
I'm just surprise after surprise about you. Being an American, we don't speak very many languages, you know. So you're so incredibly fluent in English. I just assumed, and you living in London, I just assumed. Wow, you're a very astonishing person, Monita.
Thanks. People in London, as soon as I open my mouth, they hear the accent. They're like, "Where are you from?"
It's funny. Yeah, no, not for me. I can't tell. Ben, would you say in your experience, have you had a blessed life? Like, has that been your experience moving through life? Have you just had things kind of go easily for you?
In a sense, I don't know how to say it, but like I'm very grateful for everything that has happened in the past because it brought me here. Without that, I couldn't be like how I am now and how I feel now, I think.
Right.
But like for me, it's almost like beginning of 2021, that is when I kind of started being like this. And I remember, I think the moment I wrote down like old identity, new identity, or like true identity, because I've always been this. But it was just like, like when you grow up, especially like teenagers and stuff, like everybody else's belief systems, and you take it on, you try to be in a box, in a box, in a box. And then in 2021, beginning of it, I realized actually like I can feel completely different. And I had these like new feelings, like I was like, and I realized how I've been seeing life as like gray, like I was always like gray. And then like that was a moment when I recognized it and I was like, wow, I can choose to be like different, and I can choose to see the world like this, and I can kind of always feel like this. And since then I've been like, like I have like my baseline is like for life is like higher now, and I'm like I kind of hold myself up to like that standard ish. Like I try because it's more fun there, but yeah, like
I
childhood and stuff,
love
it wasn't.
that. My next guest is an angel on earth. Her name is Sarah Potter. She is a color witch. She does tarot scopes for Cosmopolitan magazine. She is an ethereal art curator, angel witch. She and I talk about what it's like to go through life extremely sensitive, skinless, and about ways that we can support ourselves as sensitive human beings. And we also talk about how prevalent negative self-talk is among people, and how terribly we tend to talk to ourselves as people. I used to talk really terribly to myself too, and it was a bad habit. It is just like any habit that stands in the way of your sovereignty and your joy. I wrote a book about that. I'll get to that a little bit later. But if you have a habit of talking bad to yourself, I really encourage you to get out of it. Don't talk to yourself in a way that you wouldn't talk to someone who you love and cherish. And if you would talk to those people in that way, then please just examine what you're doing here. This is a book that I wrote called Empower Your Magical Self with a 1-Month Habit Break, a handbook for reclaiming sovereignty in 30 days. I wrote it to help people quit any habit that is standing in the way of their sovereignty and their joy. I used to drink a lot. I used to drink at least a bottle of wine a day. And I can tell you today, I have not had a drink in over a year, which is a huge accomplishment for me. I broke several other big, long-standing habits too, and I developed a method for doing that. And this is the book that I wrote about it. So Sarah and I talk about habits like talking bad to ourselves, being mean to ourselves, and how overcoming those habits can benefit your life. So please enjoy this clip from episode 6 with color witch Sarah Potter.
I feel like when we feel things so deeply, when we see the world through many different layers, when we're conscious, when we're connected, because we are all connected energetically. But I think that some people have an easier way of blocking it out or putting up, whether it's putting up boundaries or just, I think people feel on different levels. And I can only speak to the experience of being a psychic, but I was talking to a friend about what it's like to be this sensitive. And he's like, I'm going to say it back to you, what you just said to me. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you said that it feels like you're walking around with no skin on. And I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we are all creative beings. I think we all have intuitive abilities. It's just, again, different levels of it, right, and how we perceive the world. And I have really come to understand through my recovery and self-work and personal growth is that I can really connect to when I was like drinking and using. It was because I was like, a lot of it had to do with being so sensitive and feeling so many things and not knowing what to do with it. Right. So I feel like that's part of, through my perspective, that's how I would answer the question. Right. Is just, I think that we're talking about people who have a great deal of sensitivity, and we don't always have the skills and the tools to understand what to do with that sensitivity, how to have boundaries around the sensitivity, how to protect ourselves, and how to work with it. So, I think it can be a really challenging way to live, but I also think it's a really beautiful way to live. But I think you have to understand yourself and how to work with it and make it work.
Yeah.
I was sitting and thinking this morning about um, some of the themes that come up in readings,
Yeah.
and I think about how it can relate to tarot and how tarot provides such supportive guidance. And something I see over and over again is how harsh we are to ourselves,
Yes.
and the lack of acceptance, compassion, and love that we could bestow upon ourselves, that I feel like we would never treat other people in that way, or like ever speak to other people that way. But for some reason, we feel like we deserve that kind of critical talk. And I really feel like when we can show ourselves that love and acceptance and compassion, life is stressful. There's a lot of challenges in life, but it makes it a lot, I think, easier if we can show ourselves that understanding and love. And I can really relate to that permission you're talking about, and that understanding. And yeah, I mean, I think being a human is wonderful, but it is difficult
It's
too.
My next guest is Jasmine, aka Witchy Adams, on social media. She's such a joy. I love this young woman so much. She's a young mom and an intuitive. She's a tarot reader. And she's just really, really wise. I was so excited that I met her on social media and we've become friends. And I just adore her. I can't say enough about her. Like me, she is autistic. And we talk about being neurospicy, being autistic in our interview, and we talk about how difficult it is to overcome the programming of society. So that's a little bit of what we talk about in our episode. I hope that you'll enjoy this clip with my friend Jasmine. Right. So for people watching this who are trying to maybe get out of that situation where they're being overwhelmed and they're feeling bombarded and they feel like they can't live a soul lit because they have the fucking bills to pay and they have this not, what would be some helpful words for you that you could get them maybe inspired to make that choice for themselves?
Much like what you said, I'm going to piggyback off of what you said. When people tell you it's easy for you to say, it is extremely difficult to trust something you don't see, and trust to go against what we all have been conditioned to know. So if there are feelings of frustration and confusion, of course there are. Of course there are. I think the first step is to stop judging whatever is coming up, because it's coming up for a reason. And whatever feeling it is. My thing, you say soul lit, I feel like whatever puts me in autopilot is something I no longer can be around.
Right.
I
can't eject autopilot.
Yes, I cannot. So if I feel like I'm only saying yes to make somebody happy, or I feel like I said that thing so I would be liked, whenever those little triggers, those little things come back up, it's a invitation to go inward. It's an invitation to go, why do I feel like I can't be myself in this moment? It is a lot of, and it's exhausting, but it is a lot of checking in with yourself. And when you've never checked in with yourself, it feels crazy. It feels like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here talking to myself and this is weird. Push through that. Push through that. Like, this is weird and I shouldn't be doing this, because that's that conditioned side of our brains coming out to protect us and all that other stuff. Push through that feeling, understand that confusion and all that anger, all of that is righteous, all of that is real. And of course you're feeling that stuff. So when you stop judging it, you are able to start finding the sources of why you feel that way. Oh, I'm anxious every night and you don't know why. Well, it's because you have the news on till 12 a.m. or you're watching this or that. When you start peeling that back, it does open up for you. But if you're continuing to judge every feeling that comes up, you're never going to have that moment.
The 8th episode of the second season of my podcast, Empower Your Magical Self, features Joe Ellison. He is a musician who lives in the Napa Valley in California. But that's not the reason I have him on here. I had Joe on my show because he is such a cool and inspiring and fun fellow. He makes videos on TikTok like so many of my other guests, and his videos are quite inspiring. Joe grew up as a pretty devoted Christian, and within this episode, he and I talk about the problems that he encountered within the church and with people who call themselves Christians, and specifically with white people. He's a Black gentleman. It's a great episode. It's a really deep look into just a fascinating gentleman who has a great story to tell. So please enjoy this little clip. Season 2, episode 8, Joe Ellison.
Down, but I remember for me, when I really started thinking about being happy within myself, because like I said, I spent a ton of time just trying to be, for the most part, not always, but trying to be the person that people thought I should have been. Or that was people I was sitting in a pew with, friends that I went to college with, because I went to Point Loma Nazarene University. I went to a Christian college down there. 99% lily white.
Wow.
And I don't have any problems with white people. Most people don't know I do have kids. They're interracial. They're mixed. My stepdad, who I called my dad almost my entire life, was white. And I'm sure you know that already, having watched the channel and all of that. Mm-hmm. But it's like you just spend so much time trying to fulfill this vision of what people think you should be, because you want people to say, it's like, oh, you're a good person, Joe. You're like, quote unquote, you're one of the good ones, know?
Yeah.
And I remember it was 2008. And it was when Barack Obama started, he came out of literally nowhere,
Right.
And I know he was a senator in Chicago and all of that, but I'd never heard of him. And all of a sudden he was running for president.
Sure.
And he just shot through the primaries he was literally like a streak of lightning that came out of nowhere. And people were asking me, it's like, are you going to vote for him? Are you going to vote for him? And I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. Like, And then I started listening to the way that people were talking about him. And I was especially listening to the way church people talked about him. And I could not believe that the people that were telling me that, we should love one another, that God loves everybody, all of a sudden the language changed. And I'm like, what happened? Like, people that I thought were really nice, and I was listening to the way that they were talking about him, and in the way that they started talking about other people. And of course, everything just snowballs. And I'm just like, it hurt really deeply, to the point where it was like, I don't know who to trust anymore, And I got to thinking, it's like, well, who have I been on? And it was so frustrating to me, because it's like, no matter what I did, I felt like I could never quite fit into that circle that I at the time I so desperately wanted to. And I think it was around the time, when Trump really burst onto the scene, not to make this a political thing, because it's not really political. And I think when we talk about, race and fitting in, especially for me, because a lot of this has so much to do with perception. Like, you were talking about how do you perceive yourself? And it's right. Like, I was perceiving myself the way I wanted, I wanted people to look at me the way that they looked at their other companions, their white friend, instead of just me as a person or as a Black person. And it's like, I wasn't seeing it. And then when I looked back, and I was reevaluating, like, who am I standing with? And it was, when I get asked about this, I always tell people, it was like, have you ever seen a Spike Lee movie? And at any given point in the Spike Lee movie, when the main character realizes the whole plot of his story, like, he stands still and you just see the room moving around him. Yeah. That's literally what was happening to me. I was like, holy crap. Who are these people I'm around?
My next guest is a brilliant British witch named Kellyanne Maddox. She has a great book called Rebel Witch, and another book called Witch in Darkness that just came out. She's very inspirational to me. And in this episode, we talk about the necessity of self-care as a part of activism, not as in any way opposed to activism. We talk about how important it is to take care of oneself to be able to continue to give, and how taking really good care of yourself is in no way selfish. It is a way of giving back to the collective. Kellyanne's a brilliant witch. I hope that you'll enjoy this clip and check out the episode with her. This is episode 9 with my guest, British witch Kellyanne Maddox.
I feel like just in terms of people every day waking up and, as you said, feeling like, how the hell am I supposed to feel joyful? How the hell am I supposed to go about my business? How am I supposed to do anything? I feel like that's a really valid, salient thing to feel, and we can get into that place sometimes, but we just can't afford to drop anchor there, because if we do not fuel ourselves and nurture ourselves and look after like our body clock and our wellness and the things we need to do in our lives, we will not be useful to any kind of change or revolution. We just won't be. We'll burn out and we'll be very, very short-lived accomplices to a cause that we really care about. So the first thing I would say about long-term activism is you must care for yourself. It's not just some caprice or something you do because you're arrogant or self-involved. It's a necessity to self-love and be a long-term activist. So if you struggle to do it because you're thinking about the people that are going through hell right now, which is very valid, I would say at least do it because you want to continue to have a role in that fight. You want to continue to learn, to donate, to protest, to do whatever it is you're doing. You will not be able to do that if your own cup is empty, if that makes sense.
To my whole raison d'etre is empowering our magical selves. The whole game is to learn how to love myself and to learn how to live in the world without it being agony every second of the day. That is what I want when I say empower your magical self. That is what I want to offer to anybody, to know, what does somebody do?
Yeah. I mean, I think similarly about you, magic wise, that it's energy. I think of it as electricity, and I always say you can use electricity to light up a house or blow up a house. It's completely up to you. The energy is neutral, and you can take it and hone it. And the first step to being able to make magic is to believe that you can. I think that's the only difference between people who do magic and people who don't. I don't think there's any other entry qualification for it. It's just like you realize that magic is a thing, and then you're on your way to doing magic. That's it.
My guest for the 10th episode of season 2 of Empower Your Magical Self is a woman who I actually know in real life. She lives near me here in Colorado. She is the proprietor of Sakala, which is a wonderful spot in Denver where folks can go and teach or take yoga classes, do Reiki, have Reiki done. It's you'll learn more about it in the episode. It's a great place, and if you're in or around Denver, I highly recommend that you check it out. Megan Rubenstein and I talk about community and what that means. Check out this clip from episode 10.
We can hold on to like these micro traumas, right? Like these things that might seem so silly now when we look back on them, but they have created this narrative about who we are.
It's true. And I just want to stop for just a second, because then we can get into that of like, why can't I let go of that and then beat up on ourselves? What you said is so true, is that it has kind of wired, it's become baked into who we are. So it's not a matter of just like, oh, let it go, poof, it's gone. It's part of the mechanism of who we are. So please carry on, because I hate for people to beat themselves up over not being able to let things go.
Yeah, and I think, besides all of, the generational stuff, and the ancestral stuff, right? Because there's all of that you have to consider. Besides all of that, if you just look at this lifetime that you are currently in, the experiences that you've had, right? I mean, for myself personally, I have, and I've been diving into some EMDR.
It's fabulous. And love EMDR.
Yeah. And one of the messages that came up for me was, digging even deeper into this like idea of I'm not enough, which I'm always chasing. It's not enough. I'm not doing enough. Is this idea that I'm expendable. And I think, that's a tough one, right? Like, how do you rewrite that story? I'm expendable, that people are expendable. And I think tying this into
Sakala even, right? I'm trying to create a community where no one will ever have to feel like that. Not a single one of them is expendable. All of the people who come to Sakala, whether they're coming to share their gifts or to experience, they are Sakala. And without them, it is nothing.
The 11th episode of season 2 of Empower Your Magical Self was all about my book. I wrote this book to help you, yes, you, overcome any habit that is standing in the way of your sovereignty and your joy. So it could be something like talking bad to yourself, like constantly having negative self-talk. It could be something like drinking more than you would like to be drinking, spending more money on excessive junk that you don't need. It could be really anything that you feel like you would like to not do as much, but you don't seem to be able to stop yourself. And this book can help you just take a break from it. If you only want to take a month-long break, you don't want to stop forever, this is also for you. It's not about discipline, it's about understanding. It's about understanding why a part of you latched onto this particular habit and why it is digging in like a puppy dog and it won't give up. And you don't want to beat your dog into submission. You want to try to redirect it to something else. So this book is about redirecting that part of you that is clinging to that habit to something that is more productive for all of yourselves together. So please enjoy this clip from season 2, episode 11 of Empower Your Magical Self. To the 11th episode of Empower Your Magical Self. I don't have a guest today, and that's by design. It's not because anybody stood me up or anything. I have a kind of a guest, but it's not a human guest. It's a book. It's my book. It's a book I wrote. It's called Empower Your Magical Self, just like this show. Empower Your Magical Self with a 1-month habit break. A handbook for reclaiming sovereignty in 30 days. And I try not to call them bad habits because that's very moralistic and that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is just trying to reconcile why we develop these habits and why it's time to either take a break from the habit or break up from the habit permanently, and how we can do that while supporting ourselves and not bullying ourselves. So that's basically what the project is about. So this is the book. It's called Empower Your Magical Self with a 1-month habit break, a handbook for reclaiming sovereignty in 30 days. And it's available on Amazon as a Kindle book or as a paperback. You can also get it on the TikTok shop. If you get it on the TikTok shop, it will be signed with an inscription from me, the author. And finally, for the 12th episode of the 2nd season of Empower Your Magical Self, my guest was Star Lady Hedge, or Kyla Price, a woman who has become very dear to me. She is an astrologer who I discovered on TikTok. She lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I just think the world of her. She's so brilliant and so insightful and so kind. And in this clip, we talk about what I mentioned before, perspective change, and how absolutely vital that is, and how it's one of the things that you absolutely have under your control is the way that you look at the world and the way that you respond to the world. So please enjoy this clip with me and my friend Kyla Price, Star Lady Hedge.
I think especially if you're neurodivergent too, with autonomy, like that's where it gets me, is like, this is where I have control. It's hard for me. I can get stuck in rumination, but it is something to work. I think a lot of people also think it just happens. The brain is a muscle. You have to retrain it. You have to work it out.
Let's dwell on this, because I wanted to make the perception shift. I had to take a leap of faith that it was possible.
Yes.
And so for about 6 months, I was like, well, I'm doing this. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
And then finally, about a year in, it started to kick. And it sucks to hear it's going to take that long, but you're either going to be in that place where you are now forever, or you're going to start taking this path.
Yeah. I hate cliches, but like, they're there for a reason. They got a little bit of truth, Yeah. That phrase, fake it until you make it.
Exactly.
I kind of hate that, but it's kind of, it kind of applies. You have to, you know, our brain is like a car in snow. Like it will just go down the tracks that it already has. And if you want to change how you think, you're going to have to really shift and change that steering wheel. And that's hard.
It's
a lot.
so hard. But in my opinion, and I'll see what you think, it's the most worthwhile thing I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
To make that shift.
Absolutely. Like used to, when I didn't know my diagnosis, public, like I needed to have a drink or, you know, so I had to.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't be Kyla, you know, in front of a bunch of people without, you know, a little bit of drinks. But that was just like you said, like surviving. I had to drink a little bit. And then the next day I felt like shit and I wasn't very clear. And it's hard to get control of your perception and brain if you're not clear and you're foggy and you're doing stuff to just get by. A lot of this is you have to be present with yourself and you have to be okay with sitting in that and not just, you know, wanting to get by, wanting to fall asleep. You know, I used to just be so depressed. I would love to go to sleep. Like I would be like, I can't wait for sleep time. And it's like,
I'd take 4 to 6 hour nap in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
No problem. Because it was my escape. It was like, I don't have to deal with all of this sad shit.
I felt safe in the sleep world, but you know, that work though, now I feel safer in my world, you know, like, cause I have the choice.
That is it. Season 2 of Empower Your Magical Self is a wrap. Thank you so much for being here and for checking out this episode and whatever episodes that you have along the way. This podcast is very much a labor of love by me, a love for magic, a love for my guest, a love for getting better. I used to be in a really, really dark place for decades, and I'm not there anymore. And I did it myself. And I swear to you, on all that is sacred, you can do it too. Honestly, no matter where you are, no matter what is happening, you can turn it around. And I know that that might sound like a bunch of BS, but it's not. And if you don't believe me, listen to any guest on this show. They'll tell you the same thing. Life can be really, really hard, but you can also make it a whole lot better. I love you so much. I really do. And I appreciate you being here. And I thank you. I thank you for being who you are and for watching the show. I will be back next year in 2025. Come rain or shine, we're going to do another season. It'll be season 3 of Empower Your Magical Self. And I will have more magical guests and more advice for getting better and getting healthy and getting magical. And in the meantime, I'll be around on social media, on TikTok, as long as it's there. And you can always check me out at my website, leahwellborn.net. Pick up a copy of my book on Amazon or on TikTok. And I do wish you all the best. Wish you the happiest year yet in 2025, and that your life just keeps getting better and better. I love you. I thank you. I hope with everything that I am that you get out and empower your magical self. And I will see you back here next year. Bye.